Hey, I'm Reverend Dan. We are Soul Evolution Collaborative, and this is Strip Down Sunday, where we unchurch your Sunday experience. So, welcome. We are thrilled to have this time with you to offer some inspiration, some spiritual upliftment, and hopefully a new take on life in a uniquely Soul Evolution Collaborative kind of way. We have Strip Down Sunday mornings to offer you a streamlined experience that fits your needs. And we have some strong desire to bring an updated message of inspiration to the world at a time when it seems like we all probably need it the most. The Soul Evolution Collaborative is dedicated to personal transformation and communal evolution. So, two very quick logistics before we jump in. Everything that you could ever want to know about this community, the Soul Evolution Collaborative, what we believe and how to get involved can be found at soulevolutioncollaborative.org. So feel free to open up another tab, click that link, open up another tab and poke around while we're here. There is literally life-changing information available to you on that website. Second, it is communities with missions like ours that actually bring change to the world, and we are actively creating a new earth, new ways of life that benefit everyone. So if you are in any way able to help continue this mission, we gratefully welcome and appreciate your support. So donations can be made through the link in the menu at soulevolutioncollaborative.org. But enough of that. Let's jump into why we're really here. So today we are talking about seeing beauty and feeling grace. So I want you to take a look at this image for a moment and just think to yourself, how would you describe this? How would you describe the things in this image? What is this an image of? And just take a moment to make note of, mental note, or maybe even write down or whatever, the first couple of things that come to mind. And if you are a person like me who tends to say things like, well, there are pennies and quarters and nickels and dimes, and the pennies are copper and the others are more of a silver color, you may be what we call a differences person, and you notice the differences of things first. If you are someone who said, well, these are all coins and they're silver and they're small and they're round and they're thin, you are probably a similarities person, in which case you tend to see the similarities in things first. Neither of these approaches are either good or bad. They simply just are, and we need both similarities and differences people in the world. And in fact, there are even people who kind of sit in the middle and see both. But isn't it so interesting where we can look at this image of coins and see so many different aspects to the coins themselves? Ultimately, though, it doesn't matter. The coins are still used in exactly the same way, no matter how we see them, no matter how we count them, no matter how we categorize them or describe them, they are still used in exactly the same way. But the interesting thing to note is how easy it is to stay in that place of comparing in the material world. Put up a picture of coins and say, describe this, and we're all blinders on, focused in, looking at these coins, describing all of the things about them, however it is that we describe them. And at the same time, there are moments in life, so as easy as it is to stay in this material comparison kind of perspective, there are moments in life that literally sometimes even thrust us into this different perspective, into a perspective that the world, it's like screeching halt, like everything slows down and stops, and we kind of just hover and float there and have to see the world differently. Sometimes these moments are by choice, many other times they are not, but there is this whole other perspective that is waiting for us, waiting to happen, to give us this insight into the world in a totally different way than from this perspective of the up close and the personal with the material world in front of us. So I want to tell you a kind of story. I have had many opportunities in my life where I have found myself on intentionally. These are not by accident. Where I have found myself on remote and extended hiking trips. These are the kind where you have a large backpack carrying a week's worth of food and gear and clothes, and you're out in the wilderness, whether it be desert or forest or mountains, whatever. I've and many times have found myself on one of these trips, and I do enjoy them, most of it. Um, but on these trips, I think every time there is always this point on the trip where the question why comes to mind. Like, why are we doing this? Why did we think this was a good idea? You're there's pain involved. You're carrying a very large backpack with a lot of weight in it. Uh, and inevitably there are hills and valleys and canyons and mountains and large rocks and trees to climb over, fallen trees to climb over. And um, it's usually like halfway through that second day. The first day is kind of, you're all blissed out that we made it, we're here, it's finally time for this trip. And then the second day, you have an 8, 9, 10, 12, 13-mile day of hiking with all this gear on. And halfway through that day is usually when it happens, and you kind of are trudging up some hill going, why are we doing this? When every step of the way your foot just feels heavier and heavier. And it's really, really easy to get in that moment and question, why does anyone do this? Why are we couldn't I'm sure there was a road somewhere we could have driven to the final destination, and yet that's obviously not the point. That's really not why you're there. The point is to go through all of this on this trip, right? And so in this moment, it's really easy to question why you're doing it, and then it very easily spirals into these fleeting thoughts of regret and doubt, like, we shouldn't have done this. This is really long, and it better be worth it. And what if it's not? And what if we don't make it through that? Like, there's all of these thoughts. And then you get to the top of the mountain. You get to the summit, and your head's down because you're kind of just going along one step after the other, huffing and puffing up this mountain. And then you get to the top, and it literally is one of those moments where at some point, like, you have that realization that you are actually at the summit, and then you freeze, like everything around you freezes as your head turns up out over this view of where you just hiked up. And it is this immediate wow of the beauty, the grandeur of this whole scene, looking out over these forests and seeing the other mountains, and the horizon's not flat. It's all these layers of mountains and peaks and valleys and trees and forests of different kinds and rivers. And there's this shock, because what a juxtaposition, what a difference from this moment to moment of one step after the other to this, wow, how quickly life snaps us out of that very small, narrowed in focus of every single step to this grand scale of beauty and appreciation that is in front of us. And there is nothing else other than this hugeness, this mass appreciation for, wow, like something put all this together. How did this come to be? How did those trees all end up there and the river end up moving that way? And there really is not words to explain all of that. And then slowly we begin to realize, we begin to introduce ourselves back into the scene. We begin to realize that not only does all of this exist, but I exist as part of this. I am here as part of this whole, the thing that is so grand and beautiful. Oh, yeah, wait a minute. I'm here in this. So moments ago, when there was the exhaustion and the pain and the doubt, all of a sudden that all immediately goes away, and we are now immersed in this view, realizing all of a sudden that, oh wait, yeah, we are also of this view, of this beauty, that we are part of this something that is so massive and beautiful. And so there is no doubt when you get to the summit. There is that pain, that doubt, that those thoughts just completely gone. And that shock is just, the shock of being there is just so enormous. And eventually, that does start to fade. And then at some point, so here we are with this beauty, and then we're realizing we're part of it. And at some point we begin to realize, we begin to look back down the path that we have just come up. And there's nothing but pure appreciation and this feeling of like, I never doubted it for a minute. I never doubted we'd make, I mean, seriously, you're at this mountaintop where it's like, all of a sudden there's this huge perspective on life, that things that were so important moments ago or last week or last month just have no importance here on this mountaintop. It's just a totally different perspective. And we look down at that and we're like, wow, why was there doubt? Why was there regret? Why was there this narrowed in vision of the pain and the physical exertion that it took to actually get us up here? And so from this perspective, there's almost this distance between understanding, and your mind kind of goes back and revisits all of those steps, and you realize that it was every single one of those steps that actually got us up here. It was working through that. It was the intention of continuing on that path up that mountain that actually got us up here. And so there is this grace that is now introduced into this beauty of realizing that you made every step from whatever perspective we were in. We took every step and made every step to get ourselves up here. And so it was literally every step of the way that brought us to this place of beauty and awe, that we now have this feeling of grace of like, I can appreciate the amount of work that it took every single person to be here. I can appreciate the individual journey that we are all on, that we all have been on, that got us up here. And so we know there's this path up, and then there's this path down, or for people who are going the other direction, that path up and this path down. And so we know that everyone standing on top of this mountain has taken a similar journey to get there. And there is all of a sudden this grace and appreciation for how that actually came to be. How did we actually get to be on top of this mountain? And so it's really interesting because, as you may know, Soul Evolution Collaborative, we are celebrating our 1-year anniversary. And as part of that, we just hosted a week-long summit, and where we brought together speakers from around the country and around the movement of Centers for Spiritual Living to talk about what is next. What does creating a new world look like? How do we actually do that? And so we kind of made this fun activity the last month or so, creating preparations for this summit, that we use this metaphor of actually climbing a mountain, being on a journey towards the summit. And what was amazing, you'd think we planned all of this. You would think that we thought through all of the steps so well that it came together this way intentionally. But so we'll take the credit for that, because why not? But the amazing thing was the experience of actually summiting a mountain and then celebrating this 1-year anniversary with this virtual summit it was the exact same experience. It was, we got to the summit and we're like, wow, wow. The awe of all of the things that needed to happen happened. We made every single step of the way. We took that journey and we saw it all the way through to get to the summit, to bring all these people together, to have this new perspective on what is next, to have this new conversation on how to create a world that actually works for everyone. And I was like immediately brought back to, standing on that ridge of a mountain, looking out over all of the tall peaks in upstate New York, in the Adirondacks, going, wow, like how did this all come together? And so it was the same exact experience, that moment of pause, that moment where life shifted and all of a sudden the perspective was different. And really, it is only when we intentionally take the time to pause and look at the bigger picture that we begin to appreciate how everything is actually working for us. And I think that is really the beauty of the nature of life. When we take that moment to pause and look at all of this around us, it's when we take that 30,000 foot view, or maybe even just a step back. Maybe it doesn't even have to be 30,000 feet, but just a step back, when we have that moment to step out of that very narrowed focus of the very thing in front of us. When we're looking at that thing, whatever that is for you, it's really easy to get caught up in the suffering, the pain, whatever it is, or even just the frustration or annoyance, or even just being caught up in that moment. It's really easy to miss how that one thing is just a single step in this bigger journey. And so when we take that pause intentionally, to take the pause and recognize, that is one step. And in fact, we've taken thousands of steps every day, that all of those steps fit together into this bigger story. And so what's interesting, when you are on these trips, on these hiking trips, they're multiple days long. And so you tend to run into other groups of hikers, whether you're kind of playing leapfrog and you're all going the same direction, and we're hiking and they're on a water break, and so we pass them, and a little while later we're on a lunch break and they pass us, or whatever. Or there's just people coming the other way. There's a tendency to have this mutual and immediately understood appreciation for the journey that they're on. And so there is this underlying grace and humility that comes into play here, where you see the other people and immediately understand the bigger picture. You immediately see that step back perspective of that other group. Yet, when we are walking, when we are hiking, we so immediately have a tendency to go back into this singular focus of that very thing in front of us. And so it's really interesting that our perspective plays such a role in how we engage with our immediate surroundings and how we engage with that very next step. And so, I think we looked at this metaphorically a lot last month. And certainly we can look at this realistically in this idea of actually hiking up the mountain. But it's so much easier to see in other people that appreciation for the beauty. And so really what this is asking of us is to take that moment in our lives regularly, to pause and step out of that very singular focus, and bring into those moments a greater appreciation, a greater faith, a greater trust, knowing that those moments are in fact the thing that is going to guide and bring us to this next step. Because life is not actually made up of goalposts and mile markers, but it is really all about the journey. And the mile markers are there simply to bring us into that wider perspective. The summit is there to give us that perspective of, oh yeah, every single one of those steps was worthwhile so that we could get up here, so that we could see life, so that we could actually appreciate every single one of those steps for being simply every single one of those steps. So the perspective of being at this summit actually gives us this new understanding, right? We have this massive beauty and awe that we're up here that brings us this feeling of grace within ourselves that actually we get to bring back into those everyday moment to moment interactions. And so it is really those interactions, it is really the journey itself where we get to live and appreciate this thing we're talking about. A New Thought author, Michael Singer, says, when you walk through a beautiful botanical garden, you feel open and light, you feel love, you see beauty. You don't judge the shape and the placement of every leaf. And that's so right on. When we're on the summit, we're not up there. I didn't walk up there and continue in that tired, exhausted feeling of aches and pains and go, why is that tree there? Why is that river going that way? No, it immediately snaps you out of that feeling and into beauty and awe and this place of grace, of understanding. And yet, again, it's so easy for us to, in our moment-to-moment lives, be in that place of not understanding. Because ultimately, when you're up front and close, when you're up close and in front of the trees, there's no rhyme or reason to where the trees are in terms of how far apart they are from each other. And they might know, the trees might know. And maybe someone who studies the trees knows, I don't know. But to the average person standing in the forest, it's like, well, it's just random trees. When you get up to the summit, it's this beautiful blanket. It doesn't matter where the trees are. And so when we're on the summit, we have this greater understanding of how all of that plays together, how all of this comes together to make this interweaving of experiences into the tapestry of our life, right? And so when we have that perspective, again, we can look at our steps that brought us here. We can look at our journey and appreciate it with much more grace, and even take that grace into looking out at other people and going, yeah, I get it. I understand where you are at. I understand some of the journey that you've been on. And so it is that perspective that we really are being asked to quote the Lion King, to remember who you are. From that perspective, that is the place where we are being asked to remember the nature of ourselves, the nature of life, the nature of the journey, and to recognize it is really easy to get caught up in that moment and yet not be mindful of the moment itself. And so sometimes it does take these great awe-inspiring perspectives and moments to bring us back into that faith-filled space where we recognize, all of this really is working for us. As soon as we recognize that it is working for us. And so Ernest Holmes says, grace is the givingness of life. And that certainly is given automatically, but we are not saved by it. We are only saved by using it. The self must raise the self by the self, because the self is God. When we remember who we are, when we remember our divine nature, we have to remember then the divine nature of that which is around us, the world around us. And so we actually raise ourselves up, raise our awareness up out of this, the muck of the moment, into realizing that this moment is divinely inspired to bring us to that next moment, And we then get to bask in the beauty and the grace of the moment to moment life, knowing that literally all of life is working for us as soon as we recognize that life is working for us. And so when we do this, we tend to spend way less time in the step-by-step perspective, and we then begin to broaden our appreciation into this larger understanding of how those steps, how being mindful in every step brings us into this world where everything is working for itself to bring itself the greater experience, the greater good that is actually there waiting for us simply to just uncover. And uncovering that is in every one of those moments. And so we find ourselves in this cycle of appreciation, of recognition, from the being caught in the moment to being inspired by the moment to then appreciating the moment. And so the simplest way to do this, if you are willing to play along, even if it's just for a week, and hopefully you like it a lot, it works enough that you continue on beyond a week, but even if it's just this week, set a timer on your phone or anywhere, computer, whatever. Set a timer to go off at random times throughout the day. And every time that timer goes off, intentionally pause and look around you with wonder and curiosity at the surrounding. Look at the world, look at your environment, the scene around you, as if you had never seen it before. And how much of the world around us is in perfect divine, I would say, order, chaos, whatever, right? Like there is this moving around of stuff that is working for us in that very moment. And if you're really into it, there are even apps available, mindfulness apps available in the app stores for most phones that you can download and just have random mindfulness timers going off throughout the day. And so when we do this, we begin to take a different perspective on life. And the more we embrace that idea, the quicker we come back to that thought that life is working for us. So seeing beauty and feeling grace is this whole other perspective of life. And it is only when we intentionally take the time to pause and look at that bigger picture that we begin to appreciate how everything is actually working for us. So remembering who we are gives us the opportunity to actually see the perfection of life all around us. As soon as we recognize there is a perfection of life all around us. So thanks so much. Glad you are here. We are glad to be giving this message to you. And if you haven't done so yet, go check out soulevolutioncollaborative.org and look into all of the other amazing ways that you can join in with us.